Welcome to Community Chat. As you know, this particular program is meant to better inform and keep you up to date with some of the things going in and around the community and the region itself. Now, joining us on this day so happens to be a gentleman who I love having a conversation with. It's a timely chat that we're going to have, and that is none other than Plymouth County Sheriff Joe McDonald. Sheriff, welcome back to the show.
Well, Kevin, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. Whenever I'm with you, I feel I'm truly with a kindred spirit, someone who enjoys history and those obscure facts, unfortunately obscure facts, that I find so fascinating.
It's worth asking if, would you say that you are a student of American history?
I would say that yes, I am a student of American history. In the past, before I was, and actually for a little short while I was the sheriff, I used to teach. I was an adjunct professor at Quincy College, the Plymouth campus, and there I was able to share my love of history. I taught history there and criminal justice, so it was history, criminal justice. I did a constitutional law class or two, and I enjoyed that tremendously. And I think when I retire from the office of sheriff, which hopefully isn't anytime soon, that I'll be able to return and be able to do that at least part-time. You know, it's fun.
What would you say are your favorite periods of time that regardless of when, where, how you'd like you go back and you'll look at those periods of time as our nation was in its infancy?
Yeah, you know, that's a very difficult question to answer, but what I would say that the highlights for me obviously are the early colonial periods, you know, the Pilgrims and King Philip's War, and this is largely because that's where we live. This is what happened while we were here, or where we are. And jumping ahead, you know, from that, the French and Indian War. These are the things, you know. America is many, many things. It's an amalgam of so many wonderful things and terrible things, and you know, our story. The best story is the true story, and how it is we got to sit right here is such an interesting thing. You know, the French and Indian War and the debt that was incurred to Great Britain, which caused the taxation issue, which caused the colonists to get upset, and leading directly really to the American Revolution, which made us an independent country. And then, of course, you know, jumping ahead to 1860, the election of Abraham Lincoln and the American Civil War, a terrible conflict, but you know, the country came out of it changed for the better, and you know, it really, I think it brings home who we are and how this nation evolves, and that's one of the things. You know, we never claim to be perfect, but I think we can certainly lay claim to being the best, no question, and we get better every day.
The main purpose for our conversation, the discussion, is the misconception around America's birthday or the holiday. So many people call it, the July 4th holiday. But that's wrong, isn't it?
That is wrong. And what you have identified, and you know this because you know me, this is a pet peeve of mine, is so many people will come to me, they will see me and they'll say, Happy 4th of July. And my response to them, and I've conditioned myself now to when they say Happy 4th of July, that's not what I hear. I hear Happy Independence Day. But my response to them is always a Happy Independence Day to you. Because that really is what we are celebrating on July 4th. It is the birth of the United States, American independence.
How is this so much confusion? I mean, when was the Declaration of Independence actually minted and signed?
Indeed, Kevin. Those are also great questions, you know, and we all learned in high school, and myself included, that, you know, in Congress, July 4th, 1776, it says so right on the top of the document, right there. But it's wrong. And what do I mean by that? Now, how can I be disagreeing with one of the most sacred secular documents that we have in you know, our foundation, really? And the story behind it is an interesting one. And I think that a lot of people, when they hear me say that the 4th of July is not our Independence Day, or at least not the actual Independence Day, people, you know, sit up and they take notice. Well, what do you mean by that? I've seen the Declaration of Independence, or the copy of it. And what it means is this, you know, there was a lot of consternation may not be the right word, but when you think about how brave those delegates were to the Continental Congress who put their names on that document, eventually signed, and the document itself really wasn't signed until early August of that year, 1776. What's interesting to note also, and the document itself, the initial draft, was written by Thomas Jefferson. Historians agree to that. Even if you read primary source documents, they all tell you Thomas Jefferson wrote it. But he sought the input of John Adams of Boston, of Quincy, and Benjamin Franklin of Philadelphia. So Ben Franklin and Adams had a hand in helping Jefferson tighten this up, and that was given back to him, and he made the changes. But the vote for independence in that the Continental Congress didn't take place on July 4th. The vote actually, it was brought forward at the end of June by Richard Henry Lee of Virginia, and it was known as the Lee proposition. And Lee's position was, he wanted that vote. It was, you can imagine that when they brought this Lee resolution forward, that people were somewhat, I know that they agreed with this probably in principle, but to put their names on this was high treason. And this was the Second Continental Congress. Now, the First Continental Congress, their whole goal, or really I think what most of them wanted to do, was to seek reconciliation with Great Britain. And I think at this point in time, most people realized that probably wasn't such a big option. But so Lee put forth his resolution, and it was debated for some period of time until the 2nd of July, when the vote was taken in the Second Continental Congress, which was, the president of that was John Hancock, whose name appears very large on the document, as we know. So that vote took place July 2nd, and it passed July 2nd. All of the colonies voted for that. All the colonies save one, and that would be the colony of New York. They actually abstained. And you would think to yourself, my God, well, if everyone was for this, why did they abstain? And the reason that they abstained, the representatives from the state of New York, is that they had not received authorization from their state legislature to vote in favor of something like this. So it tells you, that as passionate as they were tempered by their thoughts of responsibility to the folks at home. So it really was July the 2nd that our independence was declared by the Second Continental Congress.
And again, if you're just tuning in, we are privileged to be speaking with Plymouth County Sheriff Joe McDonald, a self-professed historian, no, I should say historian, but a student of history, yes, American history, and any chance that I have to sit down and talk about it, especially this time of year, I seize that opportunity. You mentioned about John Hancock and how big his signature was. Was it ever told as to why he made his signature so big on that document? Was it by design or purpose?
I think that Hancock's signature was by design in all aspects. It's the penmanship is exquisite. There's no, what a great signature that he had. You can imagine that he took his time when he did that. He signed it in the middle. He was the president of the Second Continental Congress, and he wanted that to be known. And there's a great argument to be made that Hancock was actually our first president because he was the president of the Continental Congress at the time that there was no executive branch. So I think there's a good argument, and that's that's a show for another day. Who's the first president, right? But yeah, I think the placement, the size of it being much larger, and the fact that I really admire the man because, as we said, every signatory to this document, every person that signed it, was declaring not only our independence, but they were declaring their treason to the crown of Great Britain. So in a sense, they were signing their own death warrant had we not won the revolution.
It's interesting that another little nugget that I always have enjoyed us talking a little bit about is that July 4th also signifies the passing of two individuals who are part of that historical document, Thomas
Yes.
Jefferson
Yes.
and John Adams.
Yes, and as we know, Thomas Jefferson was the author of the initial document, and I think largely the author of really the whole document. He had a lot of help from Adams in making the edits, and Ben Franklin as well. And they were, at the time of the founding, they were friends, they were colleagues. And over time, as the new republic fledged itself, they became political rivals and ultimately political opponents. And again, that could be a story for another day. But what's interesting to note is that, I hesitate to use the word enemies, but they did have a falling out. And over the years, that falling out was repaired because I think their better nature prevailed. And the two of them, although, Adams lived in Quincy and you had Jefferson in Virginia, they would correspond. They wrote letters to each other back and forth and reestablished their friendship through those letters. And what's interesting, I think what you're driving at here is the other, there are, in my experience, there are not many coincidences. Things happen for a reason most of the time. And you jump forward 50 years to the day, 1826, July the 4th. Both of those individuals died. Thomas Jefferson died in the early morning hours in Virginia at Monticello, and John Adams died in Quincy. And although they don't know necessarily what Jefferson's final words were, they do know what John Adams' final words were. And John Adams' final words were chilling. Jefferson survives. Think about that. Now, there was no way at that time that he could have known that Jefferson in Virginia had predeceased him.
Right.
But his last words were about Jefferson. And I've thought about those words and what did he mean by that? And what I like to think, or this is my interpretation of this, and I think anybody that ponders this may come to a similar or even a different conclusion, but I think what he meant when he said that Jefferson survives is he meant that the Republic survives through the words of Jefferson that he helped to create. So I think what he was doing was reaffirming his commitment to the strength of the United States. And deeper words have not been spoken that I'm aware of. I mean, it's just an amazing turn of events.
So going back to our main focus on this day, and that is what can be done for folks to get a better understanding of our independence, this document that basically was the antithesis to us being a free nation, free from Great Britain. For folks to have a better understanding, it's just a matter of getting the word out and doing stuff like this?
Well, I think that there's a lot of great books about this period, and in particular, I should have brought a bibliography with me because I've got no less than 11 or 12 on my bookshelf at home. There was one, I think the title is Miracle at Philadelphia, something like that. But there's a number of great books out there that people can and should read because they're so interesting about this time period. And when you think about these nuances that we're speaking about here, there's actually sometimes a bit of humor involved in these things. Sometimes it's the coincidences that happen, like you say to yourself, wow, that shouldn't have. But it's interesting, I brought here, and I wanted to excerpt it because I didn't want to get the wording wrong.
Please do.
One of the things that it is available, and the title of this book is Dearest Friend, if people want to. And Dearest Friend is a collection of the letters between John Adams and Abigail Adams. John was writing while he was away at the Congress, and he and Abigail, and many historians, probably myself included, that as brilliant as John Adams was, Abigail was half again more brilliant. She was really, and he relied upon her. But I just want to read you a little excerpt of a letter that he wrote to Abigail on July the 3rd of 1776, talking about American independence. The second day of July, 1776, will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward, forevermore. And he had everything really accurately predicted, didn't he? With one exception, 2 days off.
Right.
But I think it's great, you know.
One other little tidbit before we wrap everything up, and prior to us having this conversation, you had also shared another little state nugget in regards to
Yes.
Being independent, and that is that Massachusetts, as it has always done throughout history,
Yeah.
leading the nation when it comes to certain things, that actually maybe was the start of independence, but only a few years earlier here in Massachusetts.
Right, Kevin. Yeah, and you know, one of the things that when I travel, I tell people, you know, that I am from Plymouth County, and everyone knows that Plymouth calls itself America's hometown, and I think as a county, we can really lay claim to that as well. We are really the birthplace of America. The America started here, declared independence here. So much of what has made this country what it is started right here, you know, miles from where we're sitting right now. And, you know, what I'm talking about, you know, it starts from the earliest days of the Plymouth colony, what their purposes were. But what you're referring to, I think, is a great one. You know, what people may not be aware of, the first Declaration of Independence in the United States, or the New World, was here in Massachusetts on October 7th of 1774. And I'll tell you a quick funny story after this about a constitutional law class that I taught and what the issue was. But it's interesting to note that, very quickly, after the Boston Tea Party, which was a very significant event in December of 1773, Massachusetts was placed under martial law. And our legislature, you know, we were allowed by the Crown to have self-government. You know, we didn't have representation in Parliament, but we had our own governments here in America. So the British placed us after the Tea Party under martial law. You remember the Intolerable Acts, and you know, they quartered British troops in our homes and things like that. But they really exercised control. Well, as any good rebel would be, you know, here in Massachusetts, we simply took our legislature, our general court, as it is called, it was called then and is called today, and they left Boston and met somewhere else, but they continued their business of government. So on this date, on October 7th, they happened to be meeting in Concord, and they declared and, you know, voted the Declaration of the independence of Massachusetts as a free and independent state in October 7, 1774. So sometime before July 2nd of 1776. So we actually in Massachusetts declared our independence before the country did.
Wow.
And the other interesting quick story, which I will share with you, at Quincy College, I did teach a constitutional law class, which I enjoyed. The thing I didn't enjoy was I didn't get to pick my own textbook. So, you know, I always bring things because I like to give them to people if they are interested in reading more. So the dean said, can you look at the textbook and just tell me what you think? So I took the textbook, I opened it up, and I read the first line of the introduction, and I closed the book, and I gave it back, and I said, I don't like it. And she says, well, you didn't even read it. Why? How can you say you don't like this book? I said, well, with all due respect to the authors and to the, you know, people that worked hard to get this book to me, I read the first line of the introduction, and it is wrong. And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, read it. The Constitution of the United States is the oldest continuously governing document in the world.
That's not true.
And she said, well, what's wrong with that? That's true. I said, it is not true.
Nope.
I said, the oldest continuously governing constitution in the world is the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that is also a thing of beauty. If you've never had a chance to page through that, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts was the model for the federal Constitution, in that it included not just the body of the Constitution, but a Bill of Rights. We had the Declaration of Rights. So, and that was a big debate at the time, whether or not we should include that. So, and I said to her, you know, think about this. The Constitution of the Commonwealth is 1780. 1780. It's, you can read it. the Constitution of the United States of America didn't get passed or come into existence in 1787 and finally ratified in 1789. So, interesting. So as we celebrate our Independence Day celebrations, I think it's fitting. I don't know how we're doing for time, but you want me to? Yeah. So what I would like to do is just share with people what it is, the significance of that act. The final line of the Declaration of Independence, and I want to make sure that I get it because I don't want to misquote this. Think of the strength and the courage required to add your name to this document. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And more of that, Kevin. I can't think we could ask for more, could we?
Could not, and I couldn't ask for a better guest to do this particular segment. I thank you again for being a guest at this time of year to talk about
thank you.
Independence Day. Hope you have a happy Independence Day, and I want to thank the audience for tuning in to a program like this and tuning in to again learn about our history, American history. Until our next segment, you are tuned in to Community Chat. Have a great day.